So if you will, follow along. I want to give you some examples of the kind of consultancy and training that I have been involved with over the last couple of years. If you will, just follow the bullet points. The first one is called Building Cultural Awareness. This is kind of a cross-cultural communication 101 course. I worked recently with a manufacturing telecommunications company here in the Denver area. And they kind of have found themselves in a global position by virtue of the fact they've sold these widgets all over the world. And now they're getting the support tech calls back from Middle East, from Saudi Arabia, from London, from wherever, and you're having these techs answer the phone expecting someone to speak coherent American English, and they're not getting that. You're getting admin administrations, admin folks, just picking up, going to the email, getting an email in a language that looks like English, but they can't really respond to it. Or vice versa, you're getting the technology person sending an email to the Japanese, and what normally would take 24, 48 hours to get a response, it's a week, and you haven't heard. Did they get it? Did they not? What's happening on the Japanese side is they're going through a consensus in terms of how to respond to that. So there's a cultural disconnect. So what I did in this case was create a 3-morning course introducing these folks. It was a general call, cross-cultural communication course. Whoever wants it, come along. And it was a gentle introduction in these 3 mornings in terms of what are the realities that can affect the way we communicate, verbally or non-verbally, with people who come from cultures other than ours. So it was a fascinating course, very well responded, and now every 3rd quarter we have the course again to whomever is interested in that. So general introduction. The second one here is diversity, and which you've probably heard of. Basically, diverse workforce, pull together teams or groups that might work together and educate each other about the reality of where they're coming from. The company I worked with was actually the federal government. They had a large influx of Vietnamese and Cambodians into their workforce. And during lunch hours, nobody talked to each other. Typically team building time, the Vietnamese are over here, Cambodians over here, Americans over here. And then when they got back on their work floor, problems were developing because no one was talking to each other, and there needed to be some verbal communication. So we created an ongoing seminar through their HR department offering ongoing diversity training, which puts these two together. Primarily introducing the Vietnamese, in this case, to the American value system and how that has affected how we do business and how we conduct ourselves in the American workplace, and vice versa, introducing the Americans into where the Vietnamese are coming from. So it was both parts of the bridge. The next one is pre-departure training. In pre-departure training, if you find yourself, one of your associates, yourself, getting an overseas assignment on business for short-term or long-term, business has realized it behooves us to be somewhat aware of where we're going before we get there. It's that simple. So this is a 1 to 3 day orientation to a group or a couple that might be going overseas for an assignment, simply to introduce them to the historical aspects of that culture that have defined who they are from a value point of view, and how that's different than our point of view, and what they can expect when they go abroad, how it might manifest in the workplace that might be a little bit more sensitive, how the dress is. Do they dress more formally? Do they call each other by first name basis as we do very, very quickly? Are they more formal? Those kind of situations. The next one here is quite the opposite. It's the repatriation. We have found that upwards to 40% of those people who have taken overseas assignment, when they return, they leave the position, they leave the company. The attrition rate is quite high for varied reasons. The company doesn't know what to do with that person with their new skill set, and that person doesn't know what to do with the company, and where that corporate culture is going because of what changes they've gone through. So a lot of this is mitigated by working with HR from the get-go, day one, when that repatriation strategy is effectively put in place from day one. Keep the channels open between corporate and that person. It's not Mr. Smith out there in Timbuktu or in Singapore. Oh, that's the guy that just returned from Singapore. Did he work? Does he work for us? Is he new? You know, they don't, out of sight, out of mind. And additionally, repatriation allows that individual to debrief to one of the few people who's actually willing to listen to them. Because in the middle of a debrief with their boss, perhaps, they might be going into great detail how they got around this cultural challenge in order to get the objectives met. And in the middle of it, they might get, excuse me, that's great. Have you seen how we've redecorated our entire corporate office structure here? Complete disconnect. There's a lack of appreciation for what that person has gone through and what value added they have for the company. So, prime example of bridging that culture gap. Next example is multicultural team building. This is working with a group of people, a select group of team that works towards a common goal together as a group. For example, I worked with a gas and oil company in Southern California quite recently. A group of 20 finance people, financial reporting, numbers, what goes in, what's come out. It's pretty straightforward. However, a lot of miscommunication going on simply because that group of 20 were spread over 7 different countries and 7 different nationalities. So I was invited to come along during their once-a-year meeting at corporate in Southern California when international HR is debriefing them on things, regulation debrief, and cultural debrief in this case. They actually got together, looked at each other, and started talking about the different realities and cultures that they're coming from, and really began to understand, I think, much better where they were coming from and why it was that they weren't responding to that email perhaps as quickly as their American counterpart in St. Louis. So again, multicultural team building, specifically designed for a team that's made up of a group living in different countries. The last one here, in terms of USA, it's strictly that. It's introducing that new hire from Singapore who's moved here to Denver to bring them somewhat, introduce them to what our value system is and how it has affected the way we do business in this country and how we respect each other and how we send memos to where we're coming from in general, why we are Americans and what's unique about that. Okay? So that's the hire that might come from the outside. And lastly on here is simply a customized solution. Essentially speaking, I've been asked by many, many different companies to come in for various reasons. And I have certain templates I use. However, no template has ever been facilitated in the same way, simply because we're working with a very unique group, different situation, different cultures, different problems or challenges with each of those. Okay?